Welcome to the Real Texas Radio Podcast. I am your host, Bronin. Thank you for tuning in once again to the Real Texas Radio Podcast, or if this is your first time, 1,000 welcomes. Per usual, I've got a big show planned. I'm going to be talking about two major topics. We've got the first entrant into the contest to become Dallas's next mayor. The election is not until November 27th, but it was an interesting mid-July development for when a lot of people aren't paying attention to politics because they're on vacation and having fun. Good for them. We're also going to talk about the next leader of the beleaguered DART agency. It looks like this candidate has all but been officially announced, and we're going to talk about his record. And I've got some cuts from the dartboard meeting on Tuesday. A number of directors on the dartboard have questions and concerns, to say the least, about this candidate. So we're going to be discussing that person as well. But first, if you haven't already, please make sure to like, subscribe, follow, download the Real Texas Radio Podcast from wherever you stream. You can also follow the show on X at RTR_Bronin, RTR_Bronin. And if you haven't checked out my latest column, I give you my analysis of the first half of 2026, the Dallas City Manager's record, Kim Tolbert. You can check that out at bronin.substack.com, bronin.substack.com. I've also tweeted that out on X at RTR_Bronin. Let's go ahead and get into it. All right, now, you're listening to the Real Texas Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Bronin, just a fed-up taxpayer bringing you all of your Texas, local, and national news. All right, we are going to kick off the show talking about the 2027 mayoral race here in Dallas. Can you believe it's already kicking off? In the middle of July, the first candidate has officially filed paperwork and announced his bid, and that is Michael Hinojosa. And some are saying that he's got the best name recognition in the race. He did 2 stints as the DISD superintendent, and a full disclosure, I used to be a teacher in Dallas ISD for 4 years, so he was my boss. And you know what? I actually met him once in the elevator at one of the, or what's now the headquarters for central staff in Dallas. I was in the elevator. I think I was there for a meeting. This would have been like 10 years ago or something like that. So I walk into the elevator, and then Michael Hinojosa walks into the elevator, and you know what he said? I'll never forget what he said. This wise statement. You know what he said to me? Good morning. Good morning. So that was my run-in with Michael Hinojosa, who, by the way, he's 70 years old. He's 70 years old. I actually thought that he was older than 70. I thought he was closer to 80. But you know what? I want to see the birth certificate.
What changed your mind?
Well, nobody was pressing it. Nobody was caring much about it. I figured you'd ask the question tonight, of course. But nobody was caring much about it. But I was the one that got him to produce the birth certificate. And
so we'll see about that. But he's allegedly 70 years old. And he is a native son of Dallas, of Oak Cliff. And he's a nice guy. He was flanked down at City Hall when he announced on, I think it was Tuesday, officially launching his campaign. It looked like he had as many as, oh my God, I think there could have been like a dozen people holding signs for him. I think he was able to get 12 people. I wonder how much he paid them to flank him as he announced his bid. And he claims he's going to be focusing on the housing, on the housing crisis and all of the issues confronting the Central Business District, downtown Dallas. Although he, as far as I can tell, has declined to opine on the future of the City Hall building, whether he thinks that the building should be abandoned and demolished or whether Dallas should repair it. And something else very interesting about Michael Hinojosa, this is probably the most concerning issue to me, is his record on property tax rates as a superintendent of Dallas ISD. And 3 years in a row, 2016, 2017, 2018, he pressed the trustees to put before the voters a huge property tax hike. He wanted 13 cents. 13 cents. So I was looking up the historical rates, and the Dallas Morning News back in 2017. Now they're trying to play this year like they're fiscal conservatives, and they're very concerned about spending and waste, fraud, and abuse under the Kim Tolbert city manager administration. Meanwhile, the Dallas Morning News supports just about every single bond, election, and property tax hike, including for Dallas ISD, and they were advocating for the trustees back in 2017 to put before voters a huge tax hike, even while acknowledging appraisals for properties were soaring, even 10 years ago, as they have continued to soar. So this is just a little bit of history. This is Michael Hinojosa's record, right? He's going to clean up downtown and clean up the city and get Dallas's affairs in order. He wants to give back to the community. And this is what he was giving as superintendent of Dallas ISD. 2016, Hinojosa proposed a 13-cent property tax increase that would have generated just over $100 million annually for initiatives, including expanded pre-kindergarten, early college, high school, strategic teacher compensation. He personally presented the proposal to the school board and urged trustees to place it before voters. The board ultimately failed to approve putting the measure on the ballot. Of course, the board, as they sit in 2026, just passed a state record bond program, which is accompanied by a property tax increase, $6.2 billion bond. Then, in 2017, just 1 year later, he was smacked down by his own board on the property tax hike in 2016. So, in typical Democrat fashion, when you lose, when you are told by the elected representatives how the electorate is feeling about a property tax hike, you just come back the next year with a redundant request. 2017, Hinojosa again supported multiple versions of a tax ratification election, including proposals for a 13-cent increase, a 6-cent increase, and a tax rate swap designed to raise operating revenue. I'm not even going to pretend that I know what that is. Then, 2018, on his third attempt, the school board approved. Third time was the charm. A 13-cent tax increase on the November ballot. And do you know what the property tax rate was in Dallas all those years ago? I think I've got it up here. I just pulled. This article is from the Dallas Morning News. It was published August 17th, 2017, just under 9 years ago, when the Dallas Morning News was pushing heavily to give we the people the opportunity to increase our own property tax rate, as if the county and its various entities, commissioner's court, city council, not so much the city council maybe at that point, but certainly the school board. Obviously, the school board is responsible for the lion's share of the property tax rate, as if they're not doing enough property tax increasing on their own. Let's get the stupid public, the closer to 0% than 20% of them, of the electorate who are actually going to show up for this nonsense, to jack up their own rate. And So then in this article promoting increasing the tax rate, DISD, they put together a list of comp cities: Grand Prairie, Lancaster, Duncanville, Cedar Hill, Capel, DeSoto, all with higher property tax rates. Dallas ISD's rate back in 2017 was $1.28 on the $100 valuation. I think it's come down miraculously to it's like 99 cents now. Even with this bond, at least for this year, the rate will remain under $1. But of course, the trustees, they can make a change at any time. And they don't need to get voter approval for that. Hopefully, we'll get some state intervention. And they have Dallas on this list, $1.28. It was the lowest on the list of, it looks like, 15 comp cities. Highland Park at the time was $1.15, the lowest. And Grand Prairie $1.59, Duncanville $1.52, Cedar Hill $1.51. That's huge on the $100 valuation. That is an exorbitant tax levy. And Hinojosa, you can look at his record in terms of improving school performance. I think when he was first reinstated as superintendent, there were at least 36 failing schools. He got it down to the low single digits. And I know in terms of urban school districts, right, and he was in the post until 2022. And if you're looking at student achievement, at least on paper, when you compare Dallas to cities that have been taken over by the state like Fort Worth and Houston, and now it looks like maybe even Austin is in danger of being taken over by the state for performance. And Dallas, at least on paper, it's better performing. But I don't know. I give any kid a reading test. This expanded pre-K and getting as many kids into pre-K as possible. As far as I can tell, it's not producing better reading scores. Getting a kid into school a year earlier or so. As I've told you before, my mother, who didn't go to college, she taught us all to read and be able to write our name and write from left in days of the week before we went into kindergarten. I quickly fell into the middle of the pack, into the average as elementary school progressed. But I at least remember that in kindergarten going in, and the kids around me, many of them, they didn't have a clue. So, if you're a parent, you got to take responsibility there, primary responsibility. You want to give me all the poverty and I work 3 jobs and all this. Well, you know what? Let me not get off on a tangent. So Hinojosa, he's the first declared candidate for mayor. And the primary election, I'm not even sure when the primary election is going to be held, maybe in the spring of 2027. But we're well over a year out, and many more candidates are expected to join the race. There's a TV lawyer, I think by the name of Ben Abbott, who has been teasing an announcement. I don't know much about him. Chad West, the bag man, who's the finance committee chair on the Dallas City Council, he's expected to run. Frick and Frack, Baz and Paula, they are potentially looking at runs. And Ray Washburn, the developer, who manages or owns Highland Park Village, many restaurants, big developer in Dallas. But I think he's got a Highland Park address. I think he domiciles in Highland Park. So I'm seeing that he would obviously have to move. He would have to take an address, domicile in Dallas. It seems just a little strange to me. You've got enough influence as a developer. You don't live in the city, but you want to run for mayor. I don't know. We'll see. So they're just kicking off. Hinojosa, he's first. First often does not give you an advantage necessarily. I don't know if he thinks he's going to scare off other candidates. I think it's just really early. In a city with poor, low voter turnout, I bet you many people who live in Dallas who've moved into the city in the last year or so, I bet you they couldn't even tell you the name of the current incumbent mayor who's been in the position for 7 years. I bet you they wouldn't even know who he is. So people are definitely not paying attention in the middle of July unless you're a Bronin of the Real Texas Radio podcast. You don't have too many hobbies. You don't have a lot of athletic events to attend, etc. All right, let's keep moving. I want to talk about Dart. And as you probably know, the CEO, Nadine Lee, she resigned. She stepped down earlier this year from Dart after navigating almost 6 or 7 Dart member cities contemplated leaving the system because they were so unhappy with the arrangement, how much money they were putting into the system versus the actual service and the ridership they were getting out of it. I'm not even going to get into the homeless, junkie, bum, criminal, vagrant, mental patient, ne'er-do-well, recidivist reprobates who often monopolize Dart and the stations and make them unattractive, unusable to most people who would consider paying for a fare. I'm glad it looks like many of the World Cup visitors used Dart, paid for Dart, so that was a boost. But Dart, as we know, it's a significant contributor to the Dallas County jail population. Many of the intakes come from Dart police officers. And so Nadine Lee, she was at the helm of Dart for about 5 years, and the board, it seems very quickly, or at least by the time the public got wind of it, selected 3 finalists for the CEO position. We learned this at the end of last week, and then I think there was like 48 hours public notice that the 3 finalist candidates would be making a public appearance at the Dart headquarters downtown on Pacific Avenue, and they would be making their pitch to the public and I think doing a meet and greet. So, the thing about public transit agencies, it's the hackorama, baby. It's hacks. So anybody they pick is going to be a hack. And whether it's an internal candidate, whether it's an external candidate, it's the hackorama. We know that Dart has been lavishly awarding bonuses to dozens of executives over the last few years. The Dallas Express has uncovered all of that spending recently, and obviously I think last year there were at least 5 murders associated with the Dart stations, most of them downtown Dallas. We know that the West End Dart station, light rail and bus terminal, is the overdose capital of Dallas, and is recently. So I've got some sound here from that occurred Tuesday where the Dart board, they were deciding on 3 finalists who they were going to extend an offer to. And it looks like they've landed on a gentleman who is most recently the CEO of public transit in Jacksonville, Florida. His name is Nathaniel Ford. Now, this is one of the Dart board members. I think there are 15 of them. And 2 of these suburban Dart board members, they expressed some reservations about the process. And so this is one of those candidates, or pardon me, this is one of the Dart board members here opining on extending an offer to Nathaniel, or Nat Ford.
2 business days later, we are being asked to vote on that candidate. Since Friday, red flag after red flag after red flag has been uncovered. And as a board member, we should be able to have the appropriate amount of time to do our research and conduct due diligence before we take a vote. So for those reasons, I am voting no. Thank you very much.
That's Doug Harbeck. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I think that he represents Cockrell Hill as one of the Dart communities. So he voted no. And so I was just pulling Nathaniel Ford's record. I was doing a little bit of research. One of the local reporters here, Laurie Brown with the Fox affiliate, she has noted in her reporting of Nat Ford that he likes his international economic development trips, including one to Spain that cost about $10,000. and that he's often outside of Jacksonville, allegedly on business. This is a little bit of what I've been able to pull. I was doing a little bit of AI research. And so Nathaniel P. Ford Sr., he's been the CEO of the Jacksonville Transportation Authority since 2012. While he has not been charged with a crime, his tenure became increasingly controversial, particularly during the last 3 years, due to questions about spending, oversight, transit performance, and the agency's autonomous vehicle program. Oh, well, a scandal plagued candidate, well, he'll fit right in with DART. Inspector General investigation into spending. So in 2024, Jacksonville's Office of Inspector General began reviewing allegations involving the JTA executive spending. Media reports focused on executive travel expenses, luxury hotel stays, meals paid with taxpayer funds, tuition reimbursement for executives, other discretionary expenditures. Ford publicly defended the expenditures before the Jacksonville City Council Finance Committee, arguing that travel was necessary to build partnerships and attract investment to Jacksonville. He denied any misuse of public funds. Wow. All right, I've got another cut here. This is from another DART board member. And I think this guy, he represents Farmers Branch and Plano. Now, I don't routinely watch the dartboard meetings. In fact, this was the first time that I ever reviewed a dartboard meeting. Usually I'll catch a media summary. So I grabbed a few clips. I don't think I'm going to be tuning in on a regular basis. I have enough underwhelming governmental bodies that I keep tabs on. I'm not looking to add any more, but here are more comments on this candidate, Nathaniel Ford.
And then as Chairman Horbaczyk just mentioned, we were told that 4 members of the board had decided to make him a candidate again, and ironically on the exact same day the candidate resigned from his current job in his current agency. I think time is needed to do due diligence on the fact that every single agency that the candidate has left in a cloud of spending controversies, and I just simply do not want that to happen to DART in 2 years from now.
Yeah, so Nathan Barbera, that is the DART board member, again, representing Plano Farmers Branch. And I'm sorry if that sound was a little bit quiet. You know, it's a one-man show here at the Real Texas Radio Podcast. And, you know, this is a good time to remind you to follow the Real Texas Radio Podcast on X at RTR_Bronin, RTR_Bronin. And I actually posted the video with captions. If you want to see those comments, go to X, RTR_Bronin. You can check those out. And also, I want to plug my most recent column, which you can find at bronin.substack.com. I just penned a column analyzing the record for the year 2026 of Dallas City Manager Kim Beiser Tolbert. That's my most recent column. It's gotten some positive feedback. And again, I got all the receipts in that column. I play the video. I link the articles to all of the claims that I make. I always like to make sure I've got my receipts. So that column has it. Again, that's bronin.substack.com, and I've tweeted that out at X at RTR_Bronin if you want to find the column there. So please check that out. All right, I've got one more cut here. So after a number of the dartboard members on Tuesday evening, they suggested that there was not enough time to evaluate candidates properly. The dartboard president, Randall Bryant, who's a hack with a bow tie, he tried to engage the attorney for the dartboard, the general counsel. He tried to get the general counsel to explain to the public how fair the process was for the CEO selection. And this is what the attorney had to say in response.
Mr. General Counsel, just want to confirm with you, to the best of your knowledge, was this process fair to all candidates?
Not being, a lot of this was done, the whole process, I wasn't in all the aspects of it. I know that Mr. Greg Moser was involved in some of them. I'm not sure that I can give that answer because I wasn't involved in all of it. Has it been?
It sounds like a no. It sounds like a no, Mr. General Counsel, that you don't think the process was fair, or it sounds like you want to get the hell away from it. You don't want your name in any way sullied with this process in finding the CEO. And here's some other background on Mr. Nathaniel Ford. Action News Jax reported that Ford spent significant time traveling nationally and internationally for transportation conferences and industry events. Let me go ahead and guess a lot of those conferences took place in the late spring or during the summer. That would be my guess. Critics argued transit riders were experiencing declining service while Mr. Ford was away creating economic development opportunities for Jackson and its transit authority. The CEO appeared absent while operational problems mounted. Travel costs were difficult to justify given JTA's performance. Ford responded that national leadership and innovation required participation in transportation organizations and conferences, which benefited Jacksonville in the long term. Oh, okay. Investigative reporting highlighted declining operational metrics, including buses frequently running late, missed routes, reduced service following the COVID hoax farce nonsense scamdemic, lower ridership, higher operating costs per passenger. And you know what else I just read earlier in the spring? Maybe he'll find kinship with the Dallas city manager. It looks like the agency under Mr. Ford's leadership just furloughed 80 senior staff members in March due to budget cuts. 80 senior staff. How are there even 80 senior staff at the Transit Authority? I don't know how many people work for that Transit Authority, but furloughed 80 senior staff in a move to save the Connection Plus service, whatever that is in Jackson. So it looks like the announcement will be coming by the end of the week that Nathaniel Ford is going to be the new DART CEO. And it was a 9-6 vote. Go figure, another 9-6 vote on downtown, just like a 9-6 vote to abandon, sell, demolish Dallas City Hall and the Dallas City Council. And, you know, some people are still crying about Dallas released its majority control of DART as a result of the negotiations with the cities, the other member cities in the suburbs, who wanted to vote to leave DART unless they wrangled financial concessions from the agency. So in order to keep all those member cities, most of them, Highland Park exited. They only have one bus route. The bus still travels through Highland Park, by the way. It just doesn't stop. It continues on to, I think it might terminate in Addison. I think it might travel through University Park as well. But in any case, most of the cities remained, even those that called elections. The electorate, like in Addison, they voted to stay with DART. And Dallas is going to be recouping some of the 1 penny of the sales tax that the city generates. It has to give it over to DART. It's going to recoup some of that, hundreds of millions of dollars over the next decade, allegedly. We'll see. So I think that was a win for Dallas, and a small price to pay to give up majority control. I think Dallas still maintains something like a 45% voting block. And as you can see, Randall Bryant, representing DART, the board president, his favorite candidate for CEO, it looks like he's going to be formally announced by the end of this week. He was able to get a clear majority to vote for this hack, as opposed to the other two hacks. So we'll see what happens. It remains to be seen. Despite my criticism, I'm pro public transit, and I don't think that every single individual should have to go out and buy a new car and finance it for $1,000 a month plus insurance and maintenance.
Clang, clang, clang went the trolley. Ding, ding, ding went the bell.
Yeah, that's right. And my grandfather, he's from Ireland, but he worked for the MBTA in Massachusetts, and he had a 30-year career driving the streetcar in Boston. So he was never in leadership or anything like that. He was, he was an employee, loyal, showed up every day on time. And in any case, so good luck to DART. Good luck to us, to our transit authority, our beleaguered transit authority. And I don't know, what are you going to do other than hope for the best at this point? You got all of these hacks over at the DART board. A majority of them are hacks anyway. Okay, I thought I was going to have time to talk about H-1B visas here in the state of Texas and birth tourism, another story that I've been following a little bit more than I usually do, some of the statewide stories, but I'm not going to have time for it today. I think this is a good place to wrap up. I am Bronin. Thank you for tuning in once again to the Real Texas Radio Podcast. If you haven't already liked, subscribed, followed, downloaded the Real Texas Radio Podcast from wherever you stream your podcast, please make sure to do so. I'm on all of the big platforms, and follow the show on X at RTR_Bronin, RTR_Bronin. I will catch you on the next episode.